Welcome to Leadership Live. My name is Steve Lois. I'm the founder of the Guide Don't Drive Leadership Framework, as well as the host of this videocast where we ask the real questions about leadership, the kind that gets you to stop and think about not only how you lead, but why you lead. And today we've got a special guest with us. I've got Fred Hunter. Fred is the CEO of Detroit PAL, an organization that is doing wonderful things in our community, influencing our youth through programs designed to build character, inspire leadership, and build skills that will last our youth for the rest of their lives. Fred, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Very glad to be here, sir.
So tell us a little bit about, so people that aren't familiar with Detroit PAL, a little bit about Detroit PAL because of the impact you're having, but also your journey with Detroit PAL.
Yeah, so Detroit PAL is a 55-year-old organization, started in 1969, really to bridge the gap between the police and the community, and the way that was done was by investing in young people.
Yep.
So our mission's helping youth find their greatness, and we do athletic programs, but everything is guided around youth development. How do we help young people see themselves, see their best, and move forward in their best in their journey? So it's a wonderful work. You know, over 300,000 kids have been.
The impact is huge.
Yeah, and it's a joy. You know, for me growing up in Detroit, familiar with Detroit PAL, and now the opportunity to be a part of the team and lead the team is great.
We'll talk a little bit more about your actual journey, because you've been there a long time.
Yes.
You've recently, in the last couple of years, became CEO,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it started with high school friends of mine. So I was at a local school, UD Jesuit, which actually has a motto, Men for Others. And two of my classmates that I graduated with, you know, had this amazing idea to start this organization called Think Detroit, you know, where they were helping to use sports, but really focus on building character. So they were 3 years into that journey. They reached out to me and said, we need an athletic director. So I came on board, and the three of us were really, helping to run things. You know, we grew from 720 participants to 5,000 in about 4.5 years. So it was through friends, through their believing in me, seeing that this would be an excellent fit for me, and then been on that journey for 24 years, the last 2.5 as CEO.
And what has changed since becoming CEO for you? Then we'll get into some more in-depth questions.
It's the perspective. So, you know, in my mind, I always saw the opportunity to lead the organization. And what's been wonderful is over those 22 years before, you know, all the experience with the different aspects, but even the relationships. You know, I think about now on the team, everybody that is on the team, you know, I was there and able to build those relationships. So when I shifted to CEO, you know, it was nice because I had those relationships, and now it's just, you know, how do I approach in terms of leading the team, bringing new people onto the team, and really moving forward with the vision that I see for the organization.
So the impact you guys have, because you're dealing with youth, is significant. But at the same time, you've got to run an organization that has to deliver on its mission every single day. How do you balance the two? How do you get people, even on their toughest days, Fred, to continue with the mission? That's a leadership challenge for anybody, whether you're in a nonprofit or in a for-profit.
Yeah, the key for me is how I come across, just in terms of my own personal vision and passion. You know, I remember one of my colleagues, when I was taking the CEO position, she says, I don't know how you're going to do it because you're so busy and committed already. So what was great is she saw the adjustment for me in terms of changing how I did things, how I approached things, and really the seriousness, not only of my approach, but what I felt about the mission and the passion for the mission and how we're going to do things. And really, it's the same thing. How do I communicate to people what we can accomplish, and then also lead and help them to become their best in the team and in the strategy that we're creating, that we're implementing as well.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it, because getting people to buy into a mission consistently is not the easiest thing in the world on an ongoing basis, because people have different interests, people have different perspectives. Everybody comes in saying, yes, I buy into the mission, but things get tough sometimes. It's tough to keep them along that same path.
Yeah, and I realize that I have to, even though it's very strong in me, I have to make sure I'm communicating outwardly, that vision, those reminders about why we're doing what we do. We've got a nice thing we say all the time, what's your why, pal? And it reminds people of the reason that they're doing it. So then when those obstacles come, and they're going to come, you can focus in on the reason that I'm personally doing it, and then also the reason that the organization is so important, to the community and to the city that we serve.
Now, some people would say, well, that's great to have that purpose and mission for a nonprofit, though, Fred. But how does it, in your experience and your thoughts and dealing with all the corporations that you deal with that support Detroit Pal, this idea of mission isn't just for nonprofits.
No, it's for everyone. I mean, you have to have clarity about your future. It starts with why. So why do you exist as a corporation? Why are you as an individual, at the corporation in terms of what you want to accomplish? But mission is essential for everyone because it gives that galvanizing point for everyone to rally around, to move toward. So with what you're doing in your actions, there's strength because you're moving towards a specific area and a specific focus.
What would you say to people, though, that leaders in particular, especially those that have been around a long time, that would say, well, mission's too altruistic. It's not practical enough.
Mission is actually essential to efficiency and effectiveness because what it does, it brings people together. When you don't have mission, you have mission drift, naturally because everyone may be doing things for different reasons, but, it's like building a team. If you're going to build a team, you got to have a goal. Is our goal to win a championship or to accomplish that? And that goal that you establish, which is your mission, really brings people together on that ultimate focus that you're trying to accomplish. And in accomplishing that goal and that focus, you actually can be more productive, more efficient, more, generate more dollars for a for-profit organization as well.
Now, you're tall, so you used to play basketball.
Yes.
Where did you play basketball? And I'm going to relate that back to what you just said here in a second.
Yeah, I played 2 years at the University of Michigan. So I was able to walk on my junior year, and then senior year I was able to be captain of a 1992 finalist team, for the University of Michigan basketball.
The reason I bring that up is based on what you were just saying. You mentioned whether sports or any other organization. And I use this analogy all the time. What's the purpose of playing sports? What's the purpose of when you play basketball? What was the purpose?
Yeah, the purpose is to win.
And everybody knew it. Everybody on the team, no matter their role, no matter their position, was focused on winning.
Correct.
But they knew what it meant to win.
Yes.
That's not always easy to translate that clearly to an organization that's not about a team sport or to a corporation or so on. You've got to get a little more creative with what defines winning. So based on that, what does winning look like for Detroit Pal?
Winning for us relates back to our mission. So the mission's helping youth find their greatness. So for us, winning is knowing that we're filling an essential gap and we have to succeed as an organization to help young people succeed. So for us, winning, and what I look back at this past year was a championship season, was us having impact in all the areas, the programs, the quality of the programs, the growth, and knowing that those essentials that we're doing are having that impact and winning for kids and winning for the community.
All those things that you just mentioned, which one is the scoreboard, like the score? Because think about it, in basketball, you knew it was to win, and you had a scoreboard that told you were winning. Even though you tracked all kinds of other metrics that supported that. What's that main score in your mind for Detroit Pal?
It's multifaceted, I would say. So one aspect is the number of kids that we're serving. So for us, if we are serving 2,000 kids or 5,000 kids or 8,000 kids, the difference, those 6,000 kids that can be impacted by our programs, number of kids that we're serving is actually a goal. But for us as an organization, it's really the impact and the outcomes that we're having in children. So if young people are in our programs, but they're not developing the character, developing the skills that they need to succeed, you can have the number of kids that, a large number of kids that
you have the volume, but not necessarily the result.
But not the result. So it's the impact and the outcome for us and being able to measure that, just based on what parents are saying, what kids are saying. And what's wonderful about the organization is we're able to talk to youth that have been in the program 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and see how the experience in that program has impacted them and affected them. So, what's nice, we can see, we can look back, Monday morning quarterback, you can look back at the previous game.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. Well, it's great because we can look 20 years back and then see how we've impacted young people. So it really gives us immediacy and urgency now, in terms of how we deliver, because we know with the programs, with the quality, with the mentorship, how we train the coaches, how we develop those aspects to make the organization successful, that we're winning now and helping young people become better.
Well, and you bring up something that's really important, and it's part of our guide, Don't Drive philosophy, is the mission can't be all about money. Not even for you. You've got to raise funds, you've got all of that, but the work you're doing allows the credibility to receive those funds where people want to give you those dollars. Corporations are the exact same way. Our primary for-profit focus can't be just on the dollars, because then you start missing some of those things. Yes. You've got to be focused on what the mission actually is, the purpose, in a more of a practical sense, because everything you just described isn't altruistic. It's actually practical.
It is.
In the impact you're making with kids, and you've showed me the pictures in your facility of athletes, professional sports athletes that are pal kids. They went through that program, so you can see the practical impact of everything that you guys have done.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the alumni or those that have been through the program, it's visual. So, through conversations, what's nice, just recognition of the logo, people see, and I'm able to hear the stories and hear the impact. But it is practical. Having kids in the program doesn't matter unless those kids know that because they were touched by my organization and made better, then we're succeeding. So it's, the impact of what does my company do for the clients that we serve, and are the clients better based on the services, based on what we deliver to those clients. And that's, for us, is the measure.
And that would get, even in a for-profit organization, that's what gets the team aligned with the organization. It's not just how much money we're making. Of course, we have to stay profitable in order to continue investing in our services and so on, but they'll buy into why you're doing what you're doing versus just the result of the dollars that are coming, but the result of the impact on your client, in your case, the impact on the kids, and as by extension, the community and everything around it. And really, your impact has been across the country because of where some of these previous kids have gone to, the alumni from your program.
Correct.
Across the board.
Yeah, we've got, just this present year of football, there's 20 NFL players that were PAL kids. So when you talk about from the San Francisco 49ers to the New England Patriots, for East to West, they're young people that were impacted in the program to learn skills to succeed in their sport, but also for us, it's those character skills. We have a model called the GREAT model, where we're teaching goal setting, resilience, embracing a healthy lifestyle, accountability, and teamwork. So we know these principles that it takes to succeed on the field or on the diamond are the same principles that it takes to succeed in education, in college, in careers, and in life as well.
I was just going to say, all those things that you just described are things that we should be teaching in every one of our corporations to get our younger or more experienced leaders set up to lead appropriately. Those are the exact same skill sets, same competencies, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, sports is a beautiful microcosm of life, because the things that you do in sports in terms of the preparation to win, the execution, the resiliency, knowing that the goal is a championship, but teams don't go undefeated often. So how do you handle losing? How do you handle winning? How do you stay focused on what the goals are for the team in that long-term picture? Not just looking at the success you have short-term, but understanding if our goal is to win a championship, how are we preparing ourselves to be the best at that time? So there's so many things that sports teaches that we're able to translate to young people, but it's the same principles, in business and in life, that goal setting, that resilience, that accountability, and that teamwork. Those things are essential for success.
The experience of losing, the resiliency that comes with it, is something that's talked about in the corporate world a ton. That too many of our incoming employees, incoming team members just they don't have that experience. They struggle with what it means to lose, whether it's their parents or the environment they grew up in or what have you. So how do you I mean, I get the sports thing, they're playing ball and they lose a game, but how do you really instill that piece, that resiliency in what you're doing with these kids in Detroit, Pal?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is looking at the long-term picture, because what happens for resiliency is based on hope and knowing that there's going to be success in the future. And if you focus just on the immediate and just on this short-term obstacle that you're having, you'll get lost in that, as opposed to understanding this is just a roadblock. This is just something that I have to overcome. So if you have that long-term perspective and can help people to stay focused on the long term, then the short-term challenges that come, you're able to have the right attitude and the right approach to it. But if you get lost in the short-term obstacle or challenge, then you won't have that resiliency. So you have it in you. It's a matter of just looking at that longer perspective and being able to coach and help people to see that longer perspective and know this is something you have to get through. And I just think so many stories, the stories, the movies we like to, watch, the books we like to read, there's usually a lot of challenges, but it's that resilience that that individual has, which inspires us. So it's understanding that resilience is in you, and you have to bring it out to be able to have your own inspirational successes and stories.
Every organization that's watching this needs to pay attention to that piece in particular, because when we get those younger members of our teams, we've got to remember that we've got to continue training them, continue educating them on that issue of resilience, and that look, loss is just a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm. It is.
You don't lose technically till you give up. And let's teach them not to give up, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. There's a philosophy that we teach in our guide Don't Drive leadership framework, and it's this idea of leaders trying not to get the best from our team members, but for our team members. How does that hit you? How does that particular, and we've not talked about this, just for the record, we've not talked about this previously, but how do you view the difference between getting from the kids versus for your kids and the impact that it has?
Yeah, it's the approach that you have. Are you so focused on the goal that the goal is more important than the person? Or do you understand that the person, if you're able to care for them, to build them up, to focus on them, they'll actually become better and you're able to achieve those goals? It's a philosophy of, if you build people up, the people will achieve the goals that you have. But it's not, you have to have goals, but it's not a matter of doing it for the goals. If you're able to do it for the people, then you're able to accomplish the goals. And it's kind of, for me, I see it as that servant leadership type of model.
Sure.
Where people know that you care for them, that you have their interest, you'll actually be able to accomplish more with that person in a team basis than if they don't feel that same focus in terms of who they are and how you care for them as well.
So you bring up servant leadership, which is a term that's been thrown around for the last decade at least, and I believe in the idea of servant leadership. Can a leader take it too far where it starts to negatively impact the person they're leading?
Yes, yeah, because you want to have strong people. And if you're not having accountability or setting goals or having the expectations for success, then that can be detrimental. And if you're doing things for people as opposed to leading them and helping them become their best, then it also can be detrimental as well. So there's definitely a balance. You can get too far one way, too far the other way. So you have to, kind of the art and science. You have to have the art of, how do I lead this person in the best way, by having my eyes on them and on their success, but also, having accountability in terms of how they're going to rise up themselves.
The way you answered that was absolutely perfect, because it's a topic of discussion in the corporate world a lot, where some CEOs or some other leaders are now saying, yeah, I don't want to bring this idea of servant leadership in. We've tried it, and now we've built a bunch of people that rely on us. And so the way you describe that is absolutely perfect. You've got to balance the two. It's not swinging to one side and doing everything. It's not swinging to the other side and doing nothing and not developing your people. There's this balance or blend that we've got to have in order to do that. But you bring up another point, this idea of accountability. Accountability is something that nonprofit world, for-profit world, or any organization, sports teams, it doesn't matter, is important to making that team effective. Fair?
Fair.
But sometimes accountability, at least in the corporate world, is viewed as a negative. My job is to, Fred, hold you accountable. That doesn't come across very well, right? It's like in the corporate world, accountability is almost a bad word. How do you take accountability and use it leverage it and use it for positive influence, not to scare people? Because that's often how it's viewed, as it's a scary thing. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think from a team approach, there has to be accountability for everyone.
Sure.
If I think about football, one of those great team sports, the accountability that each individual person has is essential for the success of the team. If you're counting on a defensive person to cover their side of the field, and
So you
they
don't get clobbered.
yeah, definitely. You have to know that you can trust and count on an individual to do what they're supposed to do, and then you do what you're supposed to do, and then the entire team succeeds. So I think understanding it from that type of teamwork philosophy is individual accountability helps create team accountability. So we're working for a larger goal, but individually, you have to do what's required for you. And then having that alignment of expectations is also an important part of it as well.
So you serve both as a leader and kind of as a coach, because you're doing both. If an organization is struggling with, because this is the question that we get a lot, Fred, is I don't know how to instill accountability. By the time an organization gets that team member, whether they've just graduated from college or they've been working for the last 15 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter. There's still a sense of there's not enough individual accountability, okay? To what you just said is absolutely accurate. As a leader, how do you start to instill that in your team when whether it's the kids or a member of your team comes to the table, and it just seems like they're missing a little bit of that accountability, so the team doesn't have the progress that they should have. How do you start to instill that?
Yeah, for me, it starts at the beginning of the relationship, and it's communication.
Okay.
You have to have open communication, transparent communication, and real communication as well.
What do you mean by that, though?
That the interval, how often you're speaking to people, related to accountability, related to performance as well. It's that balance aspect as well. If you're telling everyone just the things that they're doing good all the time, but not telling them the adjustments that they need to make to be their best, then that's not accurate communication. You have to be able to coach people and let them know what they're doing good, but then also let them know the areas that they can improve for their individual accountability, but for overall success as well. Because I think individually people want to win.
They do.
We have to communicate when they're not winning and coach them to become their best and how to win, individually, in that accountability as well.
That what you just said, and how to win. That's such an issue as we deal with organizations that are struggling with this idea of accountability. And you go ask the players on the team, what does it mean to win? What does it mean to be accountable? What are you responsible for? And all of that. There's so many that'll say, I don't know. I think this is what I'm responsible, but the reality of it is there's so little communication going on in too many organizations where the individual truly doesn't know what it means to win.
Yeah, and if it's unclear, then there's no purpose for their actions, or there's no goals or things that they're driving for as well. So, having that clarity of roles and responsibility, and knowing, when I'm succeeding and when I'm not succeeding, and being able to see that and know that, and to be able to start that off early, but to make corrections where needed, because people need to know when they're winning or when they're not winning, and if they're not, how do I make the adjustments? And with sports, it's very clear. You can look at the first quarter, second quarter, you can see what the score is. Yeah, so but I think it's our responsibility, as leaders, to make sure we're able to communicate scoreboard success, to the people that we're leading and that we're coaching as well.
It works in football, it works in other sports for a reason, because it's clear, it's simple, and so on. And although I think in the corporate world, and I don't know about in the nonprofit world, we convolute it. We make it more difficult sometimes than it is. Tracking, now you got to have the right scoreboard. You got to be tracking the right thing. We agree on that. But it's actually pretty simple as long as you're clear about what's expected. It's not hard to figure out what should be on the scoreboard for any organization. The problem is we often put the wrong thing on the scoreboard. It's like tracking yards rushed is important, but it doesn't always equal winning the game.
Correct.
So which one's more important, right? Looking at it that way. This is the one that's more important than this other one here. But we're talking about all this in the context of guide, don't drive, so to speak, and getting the best from for people, not just the best from people. Give me an example of either an individual, could be one of your kids, one of your team members, that you have coached, guided, using some of the philosophy that we just talked about. You don't have to use a name, and the result, but also some of the challenges you faced through that guiding and coaching with that individual. Putting you on the spot here, Fred.
Yeah, you are, and it's no, it's wonderful because there's different examples. I've got one team member that actually came on board as an intern. So
Okay.
in college, young, and driven. Just in terms of wanting to succeed. But what I have always set up, just in terms of my approach and how I lead, is to have high expectations, give people freedom, but then give that coaching along the way.
Yeah.
So, one of the ways that I was able to do that is to give responsibility to them, in terms of being able to own projects. And one of the things that I did, I looked at my own kind of patterns for success. What things that I learned to do in terms of succeeding, and kind of my template, and be able to openly share that template for his own success in that role. So,
Like what kind of things were on this template? That's kind of fascinating.
yeah, for me it was from running programs. So what I've learned over time, there's like 30 different aspects that it takes to run a successful program.
Okay.
So this was kind of the secret formula, per se.
Okay.
But it was something that I was open and sharing because I could cut down the learning time by being able to share this, to coach through this, and to be able to provide this to them as a template for succeeding. So it was from running programs, what are all the things that you need to think about? And then how do you approach each of those individually to be able to run successful programs as well?
And sharing that with this individual that you were describing that started as an intern, what has been the result? What was the result of your approach to leading that person or guiding that person?
Yeah, duplicating who I am in that person.
Okay.
So now I can look back 3 years later, and this is one of the most trusted people on my team because
Still with you today.
still with me today.
Okay.
Because the way I think, the way I approach things, I was able to, guide that person to all those things. So right now they think, approach, and then have similar results to I do, but I'm not doing it. So it's really that mentorship and coaching in this area through openness of here's how I do this, here's how I think about it, here's how I approach, and then coaching them along the way to now they're able to achieve the same results. And I've really duplicated myself, with that person, and then seeing them duplicate themselves as well. So
somebody
they
else.
now lead a team of 5 people as well. So that has now been one of the strongest teams that we have based on how I coached and led in the relationship at the beginning.
How do you balance kind of the individual's individualness with the way you do things? Because as you talked about, you kind of duplicated yourself, but there's got to be some of their own personality, style, context within that too. They're not an identical duplication of you.
Correct.
How do you balance those two?
Yeah, everybody has their own personalities. So, what I always make sure to do is give them the freedom to be who they are.
Yeah.
Allow people to be creative. And that's one of the great fun surprises, is that when you set the boundaries, but you allow people to be creative within those boundaries, they're free to do things that are even better or different and
Yes.
better than what I would do as well. So it's knowing those boundaries in those areas, but when you give people creativity, within the right boundaries, it's amazing what they can do and succeed, and through their own personality. Because my approach and how I do things is different, but they're still empowered to be able to move forward with their own creativity and achieve results.
A wise old friend of mine who lives here in Metro Detroit by the name of John Landis, he's said so many times to me over the years, and I've known him, I don't know, maybe 20 years now. He's said, don't ever confuse style with capability, because everybody has their own style.
Yes.
How they approach it might be completely different than how you would approach it, but it's learning from you and focusing on the ultimate result at some point. I've listened to that for a long, long time. I don't agree with the way you do things. You may not agree with the way that I do things because of our different context, experiences, and so on. but as long as we get to the same goal, that's what we're trying to get to in terms of if we were on the same team.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
So let's take kind of a switch, and whatever you're able to share is the biggest leadership challenge that you've had, without getting too specific, since you took over, pal.
Yeah, it was kind of coming into the position, looking at all the aspects. There was one area of the business when, even being on the executive team, I thought I was aware, but it was very lacking, just in terms of the production that should have been there. And really, for me, it was an area that wasn't my strength. I didn't have that knowledge of it in terms of my previous work, but I had to lean into it because it was one of those essential things that we had to have for organizational success.
Without getting too specific, then how did you do that? If it wasn't your expertise, leaning into it, I get trying to familiarize yourself, but how did you really do that? What were kind of the tactics of that? What was the result? And did it all go the way you thought it was going to go when you started dealing with that leadership challenge?
Yeah. So initially, I had to prioritize it just in terms of timing. So how did I organize my own schedule to make sure I'm dedicating the amount of time that's needed, for this? The second thing I did was find people that were smarter than me, in this particular area.
Sure.
And it is, it's humility, but it's also appreciation that people have gifts and they have strengths that you don't know. And because this was an area that I wasn't as familiar with, I had to find, experts within and even outside to be able to lean in, to give me guidance in terms of how to move things forward and to, to shore things up and to succeed in this area. And then it was a lengthy amount of time. It was probably 18 months,
Really?
that I had to be very diligent to take things which were in a negative situation and move it into a solid position and move it into a very positive position as well. So just that same resiliency, and to know that you're going to have ups and downs, but you got to move through those as well. That was something that I was able to see. So now it's one of the better areas in terms of what we do, and it's something that I continue to stay on in terms of shoring up and moving forward with as well.
So situations like that, hindsight's always 2020 in terms of how we approach things, what we've done, and so on. Learning from that, would you have done anything different now looking back on it that maybe would have sped up addressing that particular challenge?
I think I would have leaned in a little bit stronger, as well. So even though I recognize it, I think, probably in the first 3 months, just seeing the difference between the reality of where things were and understanding things a little bit further, that's what I would have done. And I think just that focus and that priority even more so early could have shortened the time as well. And I think reaching out to others a little bit more quickly as well. I think sometimes for me, and I think for many, you think you can do it on your own. You think you have to do it on your own.
We all think that to an extent, Fred. All of us.
Yeah, and what I've learned, and I think that was one of the takeaways, is if this isn't an area of strength, or it's an area of importance, and there are people that I can work with that are experts in this area, bring them in earlier. Share openly, where you can, what those challenges are, and then take that feedback from them to be able to make myself better, either to solve what we're going through or to, be able to even prepare for things that I don't know are coming just because they have that perspective. So it's willing to find other experts quicker and be able to bring them in to help them.
And that makes so much sense. And it's that what you just said in terms of hiring people that are smarter than us, better at us, more knowledge, whatever the case is. It's been talked about for years and years and years. Yet I can't tell you how many times, and you've probably experienced this with people that that leaders don't do that. They're so afraid to hire somebody else smarter than them, better than them, more competent than them, in whatever that specific area is, or in general areas. I don't understand the challenge. In fact, I had this happen in the last 2 weeks. 2 long-serving CEOs of large local organizations that really came across with I know more than everybody else, so don't make a decision until you check with me. I mean, this is kind of how they're running their organization. And the organizations, in both cases, are struggling a bit. We know that humility is important. Why do so many folks not have that humility that are in leadership roles? What's your thought?
Yeah, you have to have a strong ego to lead,
You do.
but you also have to know when to dial down the ego per se for the benefit of success, which actually can end up helping, from an ego. Because if success is the ultimate goal that you want to have, you have to know that you can't do everything, you can't know everything, and I think embracing that and understanding that is key and essential, because you can still get information and receive information in terms of what's going on, but you have to allow people to inform you, to take ownership, to help the organization succeed. So there is a releasing aspect of it, which requires trust and requires humility, but I think it's important, in terms of the overall success for any organization.
Yeah, I think that's where some of the confusion comes into play is when the organization doesn't have complete clarity of what they're supposed to be doing, their purpose, their mission. It's really easy from a leader's perspective to make the purpose and mission about us. At least that's been my experience. Even personally, that's been my experience, let alone with those that we provide coaching for and so forth. And is the purpose for that leader to help others, or is that purpose for the leader to increase their own, accolades and everything else? And I think if a lot of leaders really paid attention to that, they would realize they're often falling on the side of it's all about me, which is a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And for the organization success, you have to balance it out, because there's more required from you as a leader.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the accountability, you get all of the challenges, all the problems go to you. So there can be a feeling of, because I have to own so much, I need to own all of these challenges as well.
Yeah.
So you have to, understand that to be able to separate that. Because yes, you're going to be accountable, as a leader for your department or for your organization. But the more that you can bring in others to help to take the load off of you, and find the right people to be able to do that, it's important, because for sustainable and just for succession as well, if it's always on you and you're the only one, you're not building in those succession opportunities. That's important for that long-term success for
Legacy,
any organization.
building legacy at that particular point.
Most definitely.
Yeah, kind of along those same lines. I know there's a leadership development person that we both have a lot of accolades for, that we have a lot of trust in. That's John Maxwell. We talked about this a couple of times. And one of the things that John talks about is the influence. Leadership is all about influence. How do you play that into what you do at Detroit PAL? And how do you influence those kids? Because you're not their parent. Your team is not their parent. How do you use influence within your organization to lead your team? And how do you teach your team to use influence when actually developing these kids?
Yeah, I think one key part is just understanding that you do have influence. And because you have influence, you are a leader. And how are you going to use that role of leadership? For us, there's different levels in terms of how we lead. So, I've got the team that we lead. We also lead a variety of volunteers. There's the parents
Lots
that
of
we
volunteers.
work. Yeah, we have over 1,000 volunteers.
That you're not paying.
Correct. Yep. So they're, which is amazing, from that model.
Yeah.
So the volunteers that we work with, and then ultimately the kids, and a lot of what we do is through our staff, through the volunteers, and to the kids as well. But the influence is important for the outcomes that we want. So being able to make sure we stay aligned on how do we lead best to have the best influences, so we can have the best outcomes for the kids that we're serving.
How do you teach your staff to actually develop that level of influence with the kids? Like, what's the practical way of approaching somebody? Because it's not just the kids, right? You can apply this idea in any organization, in everything we do. As you said, everybody we come in contact with, we influence. It's a matter of, do we influence them in a positive way? Do we influence them in the negative way? And we probably do both every day, would be my guess. But how do you teach your team to start getting to the point where they actually have influence positively on others? Because having negative influence is easy. Having positive influence, I think, takes a little more work.
Yeah, and some of it is from the culture that we worked ingrained. Just make sure we're re-emphasizing. So for us as an organization, kids first is one of our key areas. So what we do is the values that we have as the organization, we continue to remind people about the values and hold ourselves to those values. So there's leadership developed from that accountability we have with each other to know, what is expected of us as an organization, as an individual, and holding each other accountable to those areas. So there's things that I do from a leader, but also from the culture that we create, there's accountability to know, is this moving people in a positive way from a leadership and influence standpoint or not. And then we've got that peer accountability that comes through as well, from the values that we have as an organization.
And all of this is, obviously, you've got to have some level of trust with the person to have a greater positive influence on those folks. You're getting kids in all over the Metro Detroit area, and I think you're even going further west now, right, in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, we're expanding. So, it is Detroit PAL, but we're in all 3 counties. We actually have kids coming to our programs from over 90 different municipalities, so all around southeastern Michigan, and some different things we're doing in Grand Rapids and Flint coming up as well.
So the basis of that influence, I think for all of us, again, is this idea of trust. So one, how do you build trust with your team? Because I mean, there's a ton of leaders that I think, and I think we all struggle with it to a certain extent, of how do you build trust with that new person that just came on board? It's kind of like, and then how do you teach your team to build trust with these kids? The kind of 2-part question. There's probably some similarities there.
Yeah. I think first from a team standpoint, so the onboarding to the organization is always vital and essential.
Yeah.
So how do I get involved, or how does the person that comes onto the board know who we are? Because we've worked to establish a very solid culture, but each person that comes in is either helping the culture or not helping the culture. And you have to explain to them, who we are, how we operate. So that onboarding of the individual is important there. And
let me make one comment on that. If you're watching this on the corporate side in particular, this is how important onboarding is in every single organization. Because too many think, well, I've now hired you, just show up and we'll figure out what to do with you. That is not a great onboarding experience, whether it's a nonprofit, for-profit, whether it's the kids you're bringing on, those that you serve. The onboarding is absolutely critical. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we got that point across.
Yeah, and for us, it is it's the essential part, because what is the culture that we want to have, and how do we bring people in at the beginning? Because it's always a lot easier to put people in the right direction at the beginning than to come back later and try to correct that direction as well. So from a staff point, that's one of the most important things that we do. And then from when we're talking with the kids and how we develop those relationships with the kids, a lot of it is built on trust, and it's developed through how we approach the program. So one of the programs we run is our summer camp. So we have actually onboarding for the parents. So we're doing
not just for the kids, but for the parents.
Yeah, so they understand who we are and what we're trying to accomplish and how we operate as an organization. Because if the parents can be on the same page with us, then they're reinforcing the things that we're doing, but they're also building trust, so that when they're with us and when they go home, there's the same communication and commonality in terms of how we're operating. So, from the parent standpoint, and then with the kids, for kids, you want to have that consistency of relationship, and listening is one of the most important things for kids in terms of knowing that they can be heard with what you're doing, and then just the heart in terms of how you come across for young people as well, because authenticity is everything. And what we've always worked to do is to make sure the people that we're bringing on are authentic in terms of their communication, and kids can see it very quickly. Are you authentic or not? But that applies to everything. Are you authentic with how you deliver? Because people can tell authenticity, and you want to make sure you have that integrity, have that authenticity as well.
Yeah, that goes whether it's a child, whether it's somebody who's been around for how many years, it doesn't really matter. I think that's absolutely critical in building that first level of trust. Is it's an overused term, I think, authentic, but it's so true and it's so important. And I think some folks struggle with, well, what does that really mean? especially from a leadership perspective? What does it mean to be authentic? I'm saying what I believe, but there's a lot of characteristics of authenticity, I think, that are out there.
Yeah, I think one aspect is consistency.
Yeah.
In terms of how consistent, and when I see you today, or I see you in another week, or I see you there, is it going to be the same person, or I'm going to get three different versions?
Yeah.
So I think that integrity that's pulled through is key for authenticity, and then just the communication, the way you communicate, and how openly you communicate in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to do. Those are other aspects, I believe, as well, from authenticity.
Yeah, open communication is key, and I use the example again of a lot of leaders don't like to share everything. And what I mean by that is, especially private. We do a lot of work with privately held companies, and sometimes the leaders are afraid, because they're privately held, to share all the information about the organization with their team members, and it starts to breed this inauthenticity. Well, they trust me a little bit with information, but they don't trust me with all of the information. And it starts to create this wedge that after a period of time, that people are like, well, how did that get created in the first place? And it's because they're holding some information back that's not allowing the team to truly understand where they're sitting. This happens at all levels across the board. So being completely open as you possibly can be is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to celebrate and talk about the wins and the successes and your own, things that you've done well, but it also is something to talk about problems or potential problems in a very proactive or productive way. And I think even as a leader, just personal vulnerability, because people know what your strengths are, they know what your weaknesses are, and when you can be authentic and just real about those areas with them, it's things they already know, but you just being able to communicate that, inspires trust in people as well.
Yeah, we've talked a couple of times. You've mentioned this accountability, whether it's team accountability, peer accountability, and so forth, and I'm going to ask you a direct question. See if you're able to answer this. Have you ever had an opportunity or a time where accountability was important? You were trying to instill accountability in a group, an individual, and so forth, and it was misinterpreted as a lack of empathy on your part. Have you ever had that happen?
Yes, I am very, very driven. And
I think we know that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have to make sure as I'm driven, that the goal, as important as the goal is, and we're going to achieve the goal, how do I make sure that people understand they're more a part of the goal and not someone that's detrimental to the goal. And what I mean by that is you can accomplish things together, and the importance of the goal and following through on the goal is key, but you still want to make sure everyone feels embraced in how you're achieving the goal and moving things forward. So yeah, we're always learning, never perfect, and just continue to try to do the best I can to succeed.
What's the most beneficial feedback from a leadership perspective that you've received from one of your team members over the years? Not from a mentor, but actually from one of your team members that has helped you lead better.
Just recently, I had someone I've been working as a colleague with for the last 3.5 years, and as a leader for the last 2 years. And there was an opportunity for them to say something publicly.
Okay.
And what they talked about was, actually categorized me as a friend.
Okay.
One of their high friends, and being very goal focused and goal oriented. It was just a different way that they categorized me, which I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
But it just showed that the intentionality I had to make sure that I'm moving things forward and I'm caring for people, that is received in a very positive way, because that's something that's important to them.
Yeah, the two-way feedback. We often talk in leadership about we have to give feedback to our teams consistently, but creating an environment where the team is comfortable giving feedback to the quote-unquote leader of the organization or leader of the team or whatever the case is not always easy to cultivate. It takes some time. I've recently had a situation where I didn't realize the impact I was having on my team, where I had one of the team members come up to me and say, everybody knows when you're having a bad day, Steve. I'm like, oh crap, this is not good. And I had a string of those just due to some things that were going on. But I appreciated the fact that when she came to me, she did it out of friends, being friends, right?
Yeah.
To a certain extent, we're colleagues and so on. But
Sure.
but she felt comfortable enough to say, you need to pull your weight, Steve, right? And creating that kind of environment is something that in any organization that we've really got to pay attention to. It takes that humility, that trust, and all of those things. But at first I was like, oh, that stung. And then I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
That she was able to do that, felt comfortable enough in being able to do that. And that's, as leaders, all of us should want to create something like that.
Yeah, because we all have blind spots, things that we don't see that others see. There's an example of a window pane. There's the things you know about yourself that others know about you. There's the things that you know about others that they don't know. There's the things that others know about you that you don't know. And that area is our blind spots, per se. And the more that we can create the type of environment where people are willing and open to give us the feedback, it shores up those potential weaknesses or things that are potential detrimental to us as leaders. That feedback can help us become better.
And it's so incredibly important because we like to say that we're self-aware, but we're only self-aware about things when somebody plants a seed that we need to be self-aware about. We don't just automatically one day wake up and say, I know I'm doing this. I mean, to a certain extent, but usually it's because there's this little seed planted and somebody's got to feel comfortable enough to plant that seed
100%.
for you to be open about that. I have one other question for you, and that's, in what you do at Detroit Pal is just changing lives, changing communities and so forth, and leaders come out of what you're doing. Specifically though, how are you and your team inspiring some of these kids as they go on in their careers, as they're no longer a PAL kid? Probably there's never a time where they're never a PAL kid once they're in, but to take on leadership roles as their career or whatever they do blossoms. How are you instilling that in some of these kids?
Yeah. One specific example I'm thinking of is we have a team member that was actually a kid, as a PAL kid.
Yeah,
So he's, I met him actually, he was in the 8th grade when I met him a couple years in. And, one aspect of why he's part of the program is just related to the police side of what we do.
Yeah.
So that was something that was inspiring. But, the experience that he had in the program and developing, now that he's on the team as a part of a team, he's able to have even more influence on the kids that are coming through, as well. So, it's creating a type of environment that people want to grow in, and then being able to replicate that environment, is what I'm seeing from that particular, team member as well. So it's for us, how do we create the right environment for kids? And then times we'll have the opportunity to get team members that can create the right environment, and then that just duplicates and replicates as well.
What are your thoughts on the comment that a lot of leadership gurus will say that everybody can be a leader? Is that true?
I think leadership is influence.
Okay.
So everyone can have influence, positive or negative.
Yep.
So I think it's true from that standpoint in terms of everyone being a leader.
Yeah.
I think personal growth as well is something that's, very, very key and very important as well. And I think you have to embrace, that where you are now versus where you're going to be in the future, you have the ability to control. And if you're choosing to do more to raise yourself up, you can be more positive leader, because you're going to have influence on everyone.
You will.
And even so I do believe that everyone can be a leader, but I think it's the intentionality to be a good leader and a stronger influence is important.
Yeah, it's the intentionality. I often ask the question when somebody, whether it's one of my team or a client, and they're not currently a leader by title, right? They don't have people reporting to them. I agree that we're all leaders to a certain extent, but when they say, I'd like to become a leader, my first question is, why? Because it tells so much about their intention
Yes.
of becoming a leader. Is Is it truly to get the best for others? Is it truly to help others become what they could be, like what Detroit Pal is doing with all of our youth here? Or is it more, and you can sense this, you can start asking questions, is it more about that's just the next thing expected of me? That's the way to get a raise. That's the way to get the accolades or the exposure, or that'll help me get my next position somewhere else. I'm not saying that some of those are bad. Some of those are questionable, but I think we've got to really, if you're listening to this or watching this, and you're thinking about becoming a leader, ask yourself why, and be honest with yourself about why, because the influence that we have and the damage we could cause if we're leading for the wrong reasons.
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. You have to. It's the heart behind it as well in terms of why you're approaching and why you're being a leader. So I think it's we have to question ourselves, because the more that you grow and the more leadership or influence you have, the stronger that influence is going to be, positively or negatively. So I think we need to ask ourselves that why question and make sure we understand why we want to get into leadership and why we want to pursue it more as well.
It's a constant learning process, being a leader. Would you agree?
It absolutely is.
So specifically in the last 3.5 years that you've been CEO,
Yeah,
right?
2.5 as CEO.
2.5 as CEO. So when you think about the last 2.5 years and what you've learned about yourself, what's the one or two things that you didn't realize about yourself prior to becoming CEO that you now know about yourself specifically related to leadership? It's a reflective question, Fred.
It is for how important the personal growth and staying on that cutting edge is for me, because the complexity, of the position requires more. And for me, that discipline that I needed to have had to continue to be ramped up. And, I can almost feel if it's light or if it's heavy, just based on the discipline and the reading and those habits that I need to have to lead the organization. So a lot of the organizational success or not success is going to be based on what I'm doing personally. Am I growing? Am I being intentional? And then what I've noticed is, when I'm doing that, then I'm able to have more success. But when I'm not, I have to recognize that and get back into those personal habits of growing, learning, and developing myself.
Yeah, it's a phrase I use often, that experience doesn't teach us. And Maxwell uses this. It's evaluated experience that teaches us. So that growth doesn't come without intention by any stretch of the imagination. You're talking about the discipline and everything else that you've had before. So I've got a final question for you, though.
Yes.
When you think about what you've created or what the team has created for Detroit Pal in all the years that you've been there, what's the legacy that you hope to leave within Detroit Pal?
For me, it's to take an organization that's had success, that can have tremendous success, but can be better strategically to sustain the success. So, 55 years in, many people served, but there have been ups and downs in terms of how we're doing as an organization. So the legacy for me is being able to develop an organization that can have sustained success, where we continue to reach as many youth as we can, in a way that we're confident and know that the organization is going to be around, for many years as well. Because it's important. It's essential in the city in terms of the influence it has and the influence it can have. So building in these processes, these systems for that sustainability, for me is going to be that tremendous, legacy that we can achieve.
Which is exactly the same as what every leader should be doing in any organization, that sustainability across the board. So you've left that place or that department or that group better than when you came in.
Yes.
And that's everything that we've talked about, Fred. And I know we've put it in the context of what Detroit Pal does in terms of our kids, but everything that you've just talked about applies directly to leaders of any level. That's why we wanted to have you on the show in the first place. But because of the work that you're doing at Detroit Pal, Fred, if people want to learn more specifically about Detroit Pal, what you're doing, the impact that they're having, regardless of where they are in the country, it doesn't really matter. How can they find out more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, one of the best ways is our website. So if you go to DetroitPal.org, we make sure to keep it comprehensive, and it really shares the heart of who we are and what we do because we're into impacting young people. So through our website is one of the other best ways, and then social media as well. Whether it's Instagram or Facebook, you can see the more recent things
The
that we're doing.
impact.
Yeah, and definitely from the kids and the environment that we work to create, because it's a fun work. It's a difficult work, as well, because you don't always have the resources that you expect to do what we do, but we find a way, and then ultimately, seeing the kids and the community and the parents and the impact is what drives us and what continues to motivate us for the future.
When I've been down to your facility and actually got a chance, and as you showed me around, to watch Fred interact with some of the kids, with the team members, and so on, and everything that Fred described today, I can, at least from my perspective, say that's who he is. That's how he lives what he does, and from a leadership perspective and the way that you operate and lead the entire PAL organization. So thank you for all the great work that you're actually doing, and thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and philosophies on leadership with all of our viewers.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always fun to talk about Detroit PAL and talk about leadership, so appreciate the opportunity to share.
They're inextricably tied to each other. So thank you for all of you for paying attention again for another episode of Leadership Live. If you want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on social media. If you want to join the show, reach out to us as well. You can always text me or call me directly at 734-837-8500. And if something about Detroit PAL has actually struck a chord with you, please reach out, take a look at their website, take a look at their social media. But can't wait to see you on our next episode of Leadership Live. We'll see you soon. Fred, again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.